My sister and I were kidnapped at the same time. Beneath the mask, the kidnapper coldly asked my husband Adrian, of these two people, you can only take one away. Adrian pointed to my sister without hesitation, I choose her. As he held my still-shaken sister and turned to leave, he didn't even glance back at me. As the kidnapper's knife slowly cut open my clothes, I laughed. After being rescued by the police, I threw the signed divorce agreement in Adrian's face. He was furious. Rose has a heart condition and can't handle the shock. Are you really making a fuss over this? I touched the scar on my face and calmly said, Adrian, sign it, and we're even. Summer, are you so eager? His voice carried a hint of defeat he himself didn't notice. I ignored him, as if he were just air. Fine. I'll sign. I'll sign right now. I calmly watched Adrian. His pen tip heavily scratched his name at the end of the divorce agreement. Adrian threw the pen forcefully, making a piercing sound. I took the agreement that would determine the fate of the rest of my life, folded it carefully, put it in my bag, then turned and walked away without the slightest reluctance. He chased after me, grabbing my wrist with such force it felt like he wanted to crush my bones. Where are you going? I'll drive you. I forcefully shook off his hand, stepped back, creating a safe distance. No need, Adrian. A flash of pained embarrassment crossed his handsome face. 3 years of marriage, and you have to be so heartless? His voice carried a hint of accusation, as if I were the one at fault. I finally laughed. The laughter spilled from my throat, carrying indescribable sarcasm and sorrow. When Adrian chose Rose, wasn't that even more heartless? I looked up, staring directly at him. His face instantly turned ashen, as if his hypocritical mask had been torn off. She has a heart condition, the situation was critical. What could I do in that case? Besides, didn't I call the police to save you? His brows furrowed tightly, suppressing the anger about to erupt. Summer, we don't have to become enemies. I looked at him, my eyes devoid of any ripples. We already are. From the moment he chose Rose without hesitation, we already were. He was completely choked by my words, all his prepared excuses stuck in his throat. Finally, that nameless rage broke through his reason. He turned around in a rage, no longer looking at me, striding toward his car. The engine's roar sounded like the howl of an injured beast. Soon, that expensive Bentley disappeared from my view. As soon as he left, my spine, taut like a bowstring, instantly relaxed. I leaned against the wall, exhaling long and deeply, as if expelling all the grievances and pain of these 3 years. Ding dong, the bank's SMS notification sounded particularly pleasant at this moment. I opened it. A huge sum of money, enough to ensure my financial security for the rest of my life, had been transferred to my account. I didn't take his company shares, I only wanted the money and a standalone courtyard house in the old city district. I slowly squatted down, burying my face in my knees. The kidnapper's lustful sneer, the burning pain like my lower body being torn apart, and the sensation of the cold blade slicing across my cheek resurfaced vividly in my mind. Adrian, you don't know, do you? By the time you called the police, it was already too late. The moment you chose Rose, you personally pushed me into true hell. The physical wounds were their warning to me. But the wounds in my heart were the complete destruction you inflicted upon me. That night, I moved directly into the courtyard house. The osmanthus trees in the yard were blooming perfectly, their faint fragrance calming the mind. For the first time in 3 years, I slept soundly. At 18, I was retrieved from the slums by my so-called biological parents. Dressed impeccably and with elegant postures, they told me I was the Jiang family's biological daughter who had been switched at birth. I thought my life had finally seen the dawn, escaping days of hunger and cold. But unexpectedly, it was just stepping from one hell into another, beautifully packaged one. They said the fake heiress's parents had both passed away, so she wouldn't be sent away, but their daily treatment was worlds apart. I lived in the smallest servant's room, with moldy walls, dark and damp. They made me eat the leftovers from the table, watching the fake heiress Rose pick and choose from the full table of dishes. Dad, Mom, this lobster isn't fresh, I won't eat it. Alright, if Rose doesn't like it, don't eat it, Lynn, hurry and clear it away. Then, that plate of almost untouched lobster became my extra meal that night. Watching the couple's meticulous pampering of Rose, and then looking at myself, I only felt it was ridiculous. Blood ties were worthless in the face of 20 years of nurturing affection. Actually, the one originally meant to marry Adrian was my sister Rose. They had been betrothed since childhood, a perfect match. But a sudden car accident caused Adrian, this favored son of heaven, to lose his male functionality and suffer from severe depression. Falling from the clouds into the mud, he became someone everyone avoided like the plague, a half-cripple. The always proud Rose screamed in front of everyone that she didn't want to marry a eunuch. Thus, this blessing fell upon me. The whole family surrounded me, Rose crying pitifully. Father sternly said the Jiang family's business relied entirely on the Gu family's support and couldn't back out of the marriage at this time. And my biological mother, holding my hand, cried and begged me. Summer, Mom begs you, Rose has been pampered since childhood and can't endure such grievances. If you marry in Rose's place, you'll be the great hero of our Jiang family. Looking at her face full of loving kindness, I only felt it was utterly ridiculous. Was I born thick-skinned and tough, deserving to endure all grievances? But they gave me no choice. After forcing me to drop out of school, the next day they bundled me up and stuffed me into the Gu family's wedding car. On the wedding night, he smashed everything in the room that could be smashed, pointed at my nose, and cursed me as a prostitute sent by the Jiang family to humiliate him. His eyes bloodshot, like a trapped beast, he pounced on me, forcibly tearing open my clothes. I was scared and trembling all over, yet I saw a man at his most vulnerable, most unbearable, deepest despair. He wanted to prove himself but found he was utterly powerless. At that moment, the madness in his eyes faded, leaving only ashen silence and self-loathing. The room was in complete disarray. Looking at him, the fear in my heart surprisingly dissipated slowly, replaced by a strange sympathy. I didn't cry or make a fuss, I just walked over and calmly told him, I can cure you. Post-marriage life was no different from hell. A sexless marriage, for a man like Adrian who was once so arrogant, was non-stop torture day and night. His depression grew increasingly severe, his moods unpredictable, humiliating me in every way. He would flip the table over trivial matters, hot soup splashing on my arm, yet he wouldn't even glance at it. He would suddenly wake up in the middle of the night, choking my neck, asking if I was mocking him. I silently endured all this because I knew it was just his illness acting up. I began incorporating treatments subtly into his daily routine. His meals were medicinal diets I carefully prepared, the incense in the study was calming herbs I personally ground. Every night before bed, I would give him a head massage to relieve his tense nerves. He went from initial resistance and smashing bowls, to later suspicion and scrutiny, and finally to silence and acquiescence. Because his body genuinely showed subtle improvements. He no longer suffered from insomnia all night, and his emotions gradually stabilized. Once, his depression flared up again, he grabbed a paper cutter from the desk and slashed at his wrist. In desperation, I took out the silver needles hidden in my suitcase for the first time. He looked at me in shock. That night, I performed a complete acupuncture treatment on him for the first time. When I removed the last silver needle, I clearly saw he felt a long-lost physiological response from his lower body. From that day on, he completely let down his guard and began to fully rely on my treatment. Our relationship also gradually changed. He would be good to me clumsily, like a child who had done wrong. He no longer smashed things and would sit quietly in the study, watching me grind herbs for him, for an entire afternoon. He began to remember I liked light flavors, spicy dishes no longer appeared on the table. He even gifted me a set of out-of-print medical classics on my birthday, which he had specially commissioned someone to bid for at an overseas auction. During that time, Adrian's body basically recovered, and he regained his vitality. And I, irredeemably, began to fall in love with this somewhat clumsy, somewhat cute man. I thought the bitterness had ended, sweetness had come, and we were finally free. just as Adrian held me for the first time, cautiously suggesting we consummate and have a child. Rose returned to the country. On the first day of her return, Adrian stayed out all night for the first time in 3 years. The next day, under the pretext of visiting, she boldly moved into our marital home. She wore my silk pajamas, swirling a wine glass, using my favorite cup. She acted like the mistress of the house, while I became the untimely guest. I looked at Adrian, hoping for an explanation. He just avoided my gaze and said indifferently, "Rose just came back, she's not used to living outside and has no place to stay temporarily." My heart, in that instant, plummeted from the warm sun of midsummer into the biting cold of winter. The medicinal meal I had personally prepared for him, simmered for 3 hours, was laughingly poured into the sink by Rose. Pinching her nose with a face full of disgust, she said, "Adrian, this herbal smell is too awful. Don't drink this mumbo-jumbo stuff anymore." I looked at Adrian. He just frowned and said to Rose, "Don't mess around." But there was no hint of reproach. At that moment, I seemed to understand something. Rose said she wanted to start a business, and Adrian mobilized all his resources, unconditionally supporting her, investing in her projects, paving the way for her. And the cause of this kidnapping was Rose's so-called entrepreneurial project. She squandered Adrian's investments recklessly, and the project quickly lost money. To shirk responsibility, she blamed all problems on a project manager, forging evidence, leading to his bankruptcy, his son's death from serious illness without money for treatment, and his wife divorcing him. That manager went insane. Thus, the man driven mad chose the most extreme way to retaliate. He kidnapped Rose. And I, who just happened to go find Adrian that day, was treated as an incidental bonus and kidnapped along with her. We were locked in an abandoned warehouse. Adrian received the kidnapper's call and rushed over at the fastest speed. The kidnapper demanded 100 million in ransom. Adrian didn't hesitate and quickly transferred the money. Watching his anxious figure, a faint warmth unexpectedly arose in my heart. Perhaps he still cared about me. However, the kidnapper's next words plunged me into an ice cave. "Why only 50 million? Are you crazy? The bank can't withdraw that much cash at once. That's all there is in the account. I'll have to gather the rest slowly." He grinned maliciously and told Adrian, "Sorry, this money is only enough to save one person. Choose one of the 2 women in front of you." The warehouse fell into deathly silence. I looked at this man I had pulled back from hell bit by bit. I thought, 3 years of daily companionship, those shared memories of facing pain, that spiritual intimacy, could make me the unique, chosen exception. However, reality gave me the loudest slap in the face. He had almost no hesitation, firmly and without delay, walking toward Rose. "I choose her." Those 3 words, like 3 poisoned daggers, precisely stabbed into my heart. He carefully untied the ropes on Rose, holding the trembling woman tightly in his arms, softly comforting her. At that moment, he was so close to me, yet so far. As he held Rose and passed by me, not even the hem of his clothes touched me. Watching his departing back, my heart cooled inch by inch, freezing into ice, then shattering into powder. The kidnapper's knife slashed across my face, a sharp sting came. Warm blood flowed down, yet I felt no pain at all. It turned out that the so-called healing, the so-called love, was just my solo performance, my wishful thinking. I begged the bandit who had already received the money to let me go. But he licked his lips, revealing a nauseating smile. "The money is my material compensation, as for you, consider it my spiritual compensation." His knife slowly cut open my clothes. When the police arrived, it started raining heavily outside. I squatted naked in the corner, my body still uncontrollably shaking. Rainwater mixed with blood and tears slid down my face. My lower body still bore the bloodstains and tearing pain from the violation. I never imagined that after 3 years of marriage, my first time would be handed over to someone else by my own husband. At that moment, I fully understood. Some people's hearts are made of stone, even if you warm them to self-immolation, you can't heat them up. I contacted a familiar lawyer and drafted that divorce agreement. Adrian, we're even. The day after the divorce, my mom's call came chasing. As soon as the call connected, it was her hysterical rant. She cursed me for being senseless, for ruining the Jiang family's future, for provoking Adrian's displeasure. Finally, in a commanding tone, she told me to roll back immediately, kneel and apologize to Adrian, beg for his forgiveness. I hung up the phone, then really went back to that villa. I went back not to apologize, but for a complete severance. In the living room, Adrian and Rose were intimately sitting on the sofa. Rose nestled in his arms, crying pitifully, repeatedly recounting how much shock she suffered in that kidnapping, how terrifying the experience was. My parents, my biological parents, were surrounding her, asking about her well-being, their faces full of concern. As if she was the only one kidnapped and hurt. Not one of them glanced at me. Not one asked if I was injured. I was like a transparent outsider intruding on their happy family. The first to notice me was my mother. She screamed, pointing at my nose and cursing, "Summer, you're crazy. How can you bring up divorce at this time? Don't you know Rose just suffered a shock? You're too selfish." I laughed, as if hearing the funniest joke in the world. Laughed until tears flowed uncontrollably. I'm selfish? I wiped away the tears, my gaze coldly sweeping over each of them. Then when you forced me to drop out and substitute in the marriage, weren't you selfish? I took out my phone and pressed play. A recording clearly sounded in the dead silent living room. A wild girl from the countryside, marrying into the Gu family is your blessing. Don't be ungrateful. This was my father's stern reprimand. Rose is the treasure we've held in our palms for 20 years, we can't ruin her. Summer, just help the family. This was my mother's hypocritical plea. The living room instantly fell into deathly silence. My parents' faces turned from flushed red to pale white. Rose also stopped her clumsy performance, looking at me in disbelief. Word by word, I clearly declared to them, from today on, I, Summer, with you Jiang family. Sever all ties. In front of them, I blocked all their contact methods. Then, without looking back, I left that nauseating place. At the fastest speed, I sold all the domestic properties Adrian compensated me with, converting them all to cash. Then I booked a flight ticket abroad. At the moment the plane took off, looking at the city lights growing smaller outside the window, there was no reluctance in my heart. Goodbye, Adrian. Goodbye, my ridiculous family. From now on, we have no more entanglements. Using the huge sum from the divorce, I established my own integrated Chinese Western medicine laboratory abroad. Many people thought this amount was astronomical. But for me, my most precious wealth was never money. It was the unique clinical treatment experience accumulated over these 3 years on Adrian. He was like a living collection of difficult and miscellaneous diseases. Now, what I needed to do was turn that folk remedy originally tailored for him alone into a standardized medical protocol that could benefit countless male patients. After I left, Adrian's physical condition, as I expected, plummeted. His depression relapsed and was more severe than before. His prized male function completely failed, returning to the desperate state of 3 years ago. He sought famous doctors worldwide, spending countless money, but all doctors were helpless with him. They all said his previous recovery was itself a medical miracle, fundamentally unreplicable. Only then did Adrian belatedly realize, like a madman, I, Summer, was his only, and lifelong only, medicine. And Rose, who made him abandon me, after his repeated failures, her eyes showed undisguised disgust and contempt. That look made his every impotence in bed seem utterly cheap and ridiculous. He began frantically searching for me. Calling, messaging, going to places I might have been before. But he couldn't find me. I had vanished like evaporated water. Finally, he somehow learned my whereabouts from a friend and immediately booked a flight to come over. When he found my laboratory, his face still carried a trace of his habitual, condescending superiority. He probably thought that as long as he appeared before me, I should gratefully pounce on him, begging him to take me away. However, he was politely stopped by the receptionist. Sorry, sir, do you have an appointment? I'm here to see Summer. He frowned, unaccustomed to being blocked. Sorry, Summer is in a meeting, no appointments, no visitors. The receptionist's formulaic response made his face darken instantly. He peered inside through the laboratory's huge glass window. Then, he saw me. Dressed in a sharp white research coat, standing in the center of the conference room, confidently discussing fluently in English with a group of blonde, blue-eyed foreign experts. My face had delicate light makeup, my brows and eyes exuding an unprecedented vibrancy. It was a dazzling appearance he had never seen in the 3 years I cooked and cared for him. At that moment, for the first time, Adrian felt an emotion called panic. He realized that the canary he had caged had, unbeknownst to him, broken free from its shackles and flown to a broader sky. And that sky was a height he could no longer reach. My research project progressed very smoothly but soon encountered a key bottleneck. To overcome this challenge, I needed technical support from an authoritative expert in neurosurgery. A name immediately surfaced in my mind. My senior brother, Ethan. Back in medical school, he was godlike. Now, he is the youngest and most renowned neurosurgical expert internationally. With a try-it-out attitude, I sent him my project proposal and some core data via encrypted email. Unexpectedly, he replied the same day with just 4 words, "Wait for my return." The next day, he flew back from New York and appeared directly in my laboratory. When Ethan saw the 3 full boxes of clinical practice case data on Adrian over 3 years that I had organized, he was completely shocked. Looking at me, his eyes couldn't hide admiration and amazement. "Summer, you're a genius." He decided decisively to join my laboratory fully with core technology as investment. "Let's team up," he extended his hand, "and show the world what miracles the integration of Chinese and Western medicine can create." I shook his hand. "Okay." My collaboration with Ethan caused quite a stir in the industry. This news naturally spread back home. Rose felt an unprecedented sense of crisis and jealousy. It seemed in her perception, I should always be inferior to her. She resorted to old tricks, having paid marketing accounts smear me wildly online. Overnight, I became a charlatan with fake academic credentials, no medical license, relying on shady means to scam money. Saying how could someone expelled from university conduct medical research? Saying I was just a discarded wife from a wealthy family, crazy for money. Adrian, seeing the overwhelming news, unusually called me. His tone was complex, with a subtle superiority and pity. "I saw the news online, I can help you clarify." He probably thought this was another opportunity for him to bestow upon me. Listening to his familiar voice on the phone, I only felt it was ridiculous. I sneered, my tone unmasking sarcasm, "No need. If Adrian has this leisure, better take care of your own body first." After saying that, I hung up directly. The busy tone came. Adrian held the phone, stunned in place. He couldn't understand how I dared speak to him in this attitude. He even less understood how, in just a few months, I had become like this. The online attacks on me intensified under Rose's monetary offensive. Insulting labels like unlicensed miracle doctor, wealthy abandoned wife's shocking scam clung tightly to me. Countless uninformed netizens flooded my social accounts, hurling insults and personal attacks. Amid this chaos, my mentor from school days, a highly respected authority in medicine, suddenly spoke out for me. He posted my graduation thesis from back then, which, due to its overly advanced views, was once rated as the most imaginative student paper in the past decade. Following that, my classmates and roommates from back then also came forward. They posted articles I published in international core journals during university, proving my academic ability far surpassed my peers. They also said my dropout was not due to poor grades but forced suspension due to family reasons. Public opinion began to shift subtly. And at this time, Ethan, in his personal capacity, held a small media conference abroad. Facing countless flashes, he was composed and graceful. He publicly announced he would deeply collaborate with my laboratory as a technical partner, and openly called my research an epoch-making breakthrough in neural regeneration, a great project capable of changing countless families' fates. The weight of this statement was as heavy as Mount Tai. Public opinion exploded instantly, completely reversing. Everyone was dumbfounded. The public became wildly curious about who this Summer was, whom the god-level expert Ethan praised so highly. Now, without my intervention, the resourceful netizens began digging deeply on their own. Soon, someone unearthed the sensational kidnapping news from back then. Then, new questions arose. Why, in the same kidnapping, did Adrian only save Rose? What kind of princess is this Rose, that the other one deserved to die? Even more, someone directly exposed Rose's so-called heart disease lie. She has heart disease? Then what about the photos exposed of her booking a nightclub and partying wildly a week before the kidnapping? In the photos, she had heavy makeup, holding a wine glass, laughing happier than anyone. Where was any sign of a heart patient? The lie was punctured. The wind completely changed. Those accounts that once insulted me began quietly deleting comments. Everyone realized they might have been used as pawns. In this farce, who the real clown was self-evident. Just as Rose and Adrian were frantic over the opinion reversal, heavier truth hammers smashed down one after another. The true inside story of the kidnapping was exposed. The parents of the project manager framed by Rose, leading to his family's ruin, released online a recording of Rose's arrogant, life-disregarding phone call from back then. In the recording, she sarcastically mocked the other's incompetence and viciously said, "It's just losing some money, what's the big deal? Anyway, my brother Adrian has my back. His wife running away is none of my business? He couldn't keep his wife, serves him right. If you dare bother me again, I'll make sure your whole family can't survive in a city." This recording instantly ignited the entire internet's fury. Following that, an old nanny from the Jiang family back then also came forward. Facing the camera, she cried while recounting how after I was brought back to the Jiang family, I lived worse than the servants. She said I ate leftovers, wore Rose's discarded old clothes. She also confirmed how the Jiang family coerced and enticed me to drop out and marry the then crippled Adrian in Rose's place. Piece by piece, the sufferings I endured were publicly exposed in the most tragic way. However, for Adrian and Rose, the most fatal blow was yet to come. A video of Rose partying wildly with girlfriends during her studies abroad suddenly went viral online. In the video, she had exaggerated smoky makeup, cigarette in hand, fooling around with a group. Facing the camera, drunkenly laughing loudly, "I'm not marrying that dead eunuch. What is the Gu family? Make me marry and live as a widow? Let my stupid sister from the countryside go, haha. Maybe she'll have to use her hand." Kills me laughing. This video, like an atomic bomb, exploded on the internet. Every word, like a poison knife, precisely stabbed into Adrian's heart. The 3 words "dead eunuch" became an indelible label, branded firmly on the forehead of the Gu Group president. The whole internet was frantically forwarding and mocking. Adrian, this once lofty man, overnight became the world's biggest laughingstock. The day after the video's exposure, Gu Group's stock price plummeted, almost in a diving posture, instantly evaporating hundreds of billions. Adrian, this man who once stood at the pyramid's top, wherever he went, felt others' strange gazes. Those looks mixed with pity, contempt, and mockery made him experience a public execution worse than physical disability. Like a thoroughly enraged lion, he returned home, threw all of Rose's things out of the villa, and drove her out like a stray dog from the Gu family. Losing the Gu family's protection, plus the previous evil deeds exposed, the Jiang family's retribution came. All partners collectively announced contract terminations, banks came to collect debts. That once infinitely glorious Jiang enterprise almost overnight declared bankruptcy. And Adrian sat alone in the empty office. He watched that video that made him lose all face over and over. Watching Rose's unrestrained mockery on it, then thinking of my silent contributions and gentle companionship over those 3 years. For the first time, he felt what bone-piercing pain was. He wanted to destroy everything. Smash the computer, throw the phone, destroy the whole world. But what he most wanted to destroy was the stupid self who chose Rose back then. Regret flooded him like a tide, making him almost unable to breathe. He began frantically calling me, sending messages, but all contact methods had been blocked by me. Finally, like grasping the last straw, he booked a flight again, desperately, madly flying to find me. He thought, as long as he turned back, I would surely wait in place. He thought, as long as he apologized sincerely enough, I could act as if nothing happened. He was wrong. Terribly wrong. When he found me, I was at the award ceremony of the World Medical Summit in Switzerland. Under the spotlight, I won the year's Medical Innovation Gold Award for the Neuron Regeneration Activation Project. Wearing the starry sky-colored gown Ethan custom-made for me, I stood in the center of the stage under everyone's attention. Beside me was the equally excellent Ethan, his gaze toward me gentle and focused. I delivered my acceptance speech confidently and calmly in fluent English. While Adrian, dressed formally but unable to hide his disheveled state, was stopped by security at the outermost perimeter of the venue. He stood there in the shadows, like a pitiful and tragic figure, looking up at my radiant glory. Looking at me, who once belonged to him but was pushed away by his own hands. After the ceremony, he rushed out from somewhere, blocking me in the backstage corridor. He grabbed my hand, his eyes particularly red from being bloodshot. "Summer, I was wrong, I really was wrong." His voice hoarse, carrying a plea. "Come back, okay? Come back with me, I'll give you the goo group. I'll give you everything I have." I looked at him as if watching a clown's ridiculous performance. Gently but irrefutably, I withdrew my hand. I looked at him like a complete stranger. "Adrian, come to think of it, I have to thank you." I smiled slightly, my tone calm and unruffled. "Thank you for providing such valuable, detailed first-hand clinical data for my project. As thanks." I paused, looking at his instantly pale face, and said word by word, extremely clearly, "When my product officially launches, I can give you a 20% discount. Let you have the chance to become a real man again." My words, like the sharpest knife, shredded his last dignity to pieces. At this moment, Ethan stepped forward, unobtrusively shielding me behind him. He raised our interlocked hands. On my ring finger, a brilliant diamond ring shone with happy light under the lamps. Ethan looked at the stunned Adrian, his voice gentle yet firm. "Sorry, Mr. Adrian. My fiancé has been busy all day and needs rest." Adrian's gaze fixed deadly on that ring, as if struck by lightning. His body swayed, the whole person completely frozen in place. His world, at that moment, collapsed with a boom. A few years later, the summer biotech company I founded successfully went public, becoming a global top medical tech giant. My marriage with Ethan was happy and fulfilling. We had a smart and cute daughter, her eyes like mine, her smile just like Ethan's. The Jiang family, who did much evil back then, also got their due retribution. The Jiang parents, after bankruptcy, lived in poverty, finally dying of illness in a dark, damp low-rent house, with no one by their side at death. Rose was sentenced to prison for commercial fraud and multiple malicious slanders, spending the rest of her life in jail. And Adrian never remarried. He never recovered from that illness again. The drug I developed could cure men worldwide, but uniquely couldn't cure him. Because heart disease has no medicine. He became a lone person living in huge shadows. The only thing he did every day was sit in the empty study, collecting all news and reports about me. On his study wall hung a huge photo. It was a picture taken by a reporter when I stood on the World Medical Summit podium receiving an award. In the photo, I was confident, beautiful, with a brilliant smile. That was me, the light he could never touch again. He often had hallucinations. As if returning to an afternoon many years ago. The sun just right, the breeze mild. I was sitting beside him, head down, focused on needling him. Sunlight sprinkled on my profile, plating a soft golden light, gentle beyond words. Only at this moment did he finally understand. What I brought him was never just hope for physical recovery. Those 3 years were the closest his barren life had been to love and redemption. but he personally pushed his God into the abyss. And for himself, forever locked the door to hell. For the rest of his life, no liberation.